welcome back to another bonus episode of Rugby with Pads. And in our week of mock drafts, I said I'd promised five. I promised five. I've delivered on five. We're going to go one better, and we're going to give a little bonus episode for Saturday. And this is a bit self-serving because it does feature a product, I guess. This is the first productized offering I got outside of the merch, but this features a kit that I wanted to share with you, my listeners. Coming into draft season, it's going to be really important to practice what you preach, and I thought I built this tool, and it's not a particularly innovative or impressive tool, but I think it works in what I want, and I still would consider myself to be on the fringes of intermediate / expert play. Oh, that sounds so big headed, doesn't it? But in the way I play fantasy football, I've been playing it for a while, and I've developed some strategies and techniques that I feel like are really useful. And it starts now, and this is why I'm excited. This is why I'm putting so much content out there, because the season starts now. It doesn't start when football starts. It starts now for us. And going into your draft, whether they be in late July, early August, or whenever they are, you'll see this content coming out soon, hopefully, as well. I'm actually recording this in the middle of July, so it's a bit ahead of time. But we're expecting people to go into their drafts towards the end of training camp, coming into the second or third game of pre-season, and you're going to need something to rely on, and something that you can go and deliver upon all of the lessons we've learned in drafting 101 and 102. And what I've produced in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way is the IDK. It doesn't stand for I don't know. It stands for the Intermediate Draft Kit. What it is it's if you're familiar with the fantasy footballers, it is a play on their UDK, the Ultimate Draft Kit. I was thinking about the Penultimate Draft Kit, but I don't think it even come close to that. There are loads of tools about. You only need to type into Google, and I could probably do it now, draft tier maker or something like that, and yeah, they're fantastic. So some of them are really good. Some of them are really hard to get hold of. You've got to go behind paywalls. But what I wanted to do for subscribers of this pod is to, if you're already a subscriber, give as into rugbywithpads.com, you're a member of one of our Gridiron Guardians, you already have access to this. And I wanted to make this free for anyone who listens to this pod. So I will post everything that is in this in the pod description, and you can just use it. I've given early access to people who subscribe formally, but this is a tool that I don't see as being any secret sauce. I think it levels the playing field, because tier-based drafting has been revolutionary for me. I come away from every draft thinking I want it, because I'm avoiding the ADP trap. I'm avoiding the pitfalls, and I end up drafting the players that I like, not being forced into players that I don't, because I'm thinking about it. And rather than have every player in your head at all times, what this does is enables you to focus in on a few players that you really do like. Now, yesterday's episode, this will look familiar to you, because I did a draft on this entirely yesterday. You'll see it here, the results of what I did, who I avoid, who I got, etc. And I found this a really useful tool for me, in that it gave me a team that I really liked. And go back and listen to Friday's episode, which is number 5, to see if you liked it too, and see if this tool does actually produce something that you would want. Now, the way I use this is not necessarily the way everyone would use this. What I have in the background now, I'll show you how the sausage is made, so to speak. I've got all the players, and I've taken rankings from a couple of aggregate sites, and I've said, well, that's great to know that information, but really that's not what I'm after. I've got 70 odd players in each position, or maybe 50 to 70 players in each position who I think are fantasy relevant. And I've created a tier maker, which you can have 8 tiers in. 6 for players where you only have one position, 8 for the players that you have deeper positions in, for like running back and wide receiver. Tight ends and quarterbacks, there's less options, so I've provided less options. The idea behind this is, if you are really high, for example, on Tua Tagovailoa, put him in your first. And go from there. Now, we know that Tua goes in the 6th round. great. That's fine. And we value these guys in the same box. So the idea is you can create a tier list here. If you consider Tua to be as good this season as Patrick Mahomes, I'm using this as hyperbole. You can do that, and you say, okay, I want to stick a second to third round grade on them. I know Patrick Mahomes normally goes in the first. It reds it out because it doesn't think that's a good value, but it does think that Tua is a good value. So if you can pick him up in the sixth and get third round value in your perception, that's what we want to do for it. And that's exactly what we did yesterday. There's loads of different ways you can use this. And what I will do is in the link, you'll get an IDK version, whatever the latest version is. It's 1.0 at time of writing. I've already developed on top of that, and I've created some more stuff for it. And I'm going to keep iterating and update my rankings based on everyone that's moving about. I mean, Dalvin Cook hasn't signed, Zeke Elliott hasn't signed. There's loads of free agents still out there who, and trade candidates as well, who I think, and holdouts. Saquon Barkley could drop down in my rankings. We've got Alvin Kamara potentially getting suspended. There's loads of stuff happening still. So I want to iterate upon this and give my version of events. But my version of events is not necessarily the same version of events that you see. I'm not an analyst that, in the sense that I don't know what 300 players are doing every minute of every day. I'm not Ian Rappaport. I'm not Tom Pelissero or any of the guys from ESPN as well. Adam Schefter, not me, especially not in Twitterverse. But I do have a sense of the players that I keep an eye on. So my rankings will generally be more around players that I've kept an eye on and I think have value. So you'll see some notable omissions there. I mean, in my own tiers, I am pretty low on the likes of Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard, where the consensus is that Tony Pollard at the moment is being drafted as the RB6, at number 9 overall in PPR ranking, which I think is crazy. I wouldn't take him in the 5th, and he's going incredibly high, and I really don't like that. So I put him in tier 5, and it's almost like he for me has become an avoid player. And there are other notable names you have here that I'm just not high on. If you're high on Aaron Jones because you get enjoyment out of picking Packers players, for example, or you rode him to victory last year, that's great. Put him in a higher tier and judge it accordingly. So the idea behind this is that you get to do a couple of things with it. And what I'll do is I'll go into a previous mock draft that I've completed, and I'll show you how it works. I'll split screen it for you. Obviously, this content is much better viewed on YouTube, and it will be available early to Gridiron Guardians on YouTube already. But basically, look at any previous draft you've done. That didn't work for some reason. I don't know why. Let's have a look at this one. See if it actually loads. Here we are. And pick out a player. And the idea behind this is you do a mock draft and then you see where you like people. Now, if Patrick Mahomes normally goes in the first, etc., I think in this example he did go in the first, you put him there. And you can mark these players effectively and give each of these tiers a ranking to where, out of these players that you have grouped together. So I've grouped Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, CD Lamb, and Keenan Allen as having a range of outcomes that are similar at the end of the year. I've said they're all worth a second round grade. You then put where they're actually going, and it maybe gives you an indicator when you come to that decision. And I would recommend going back and taking a look at yesterday's episode on what to do with that player. So you can go do that for any single player. If you're not interested in Brandon Ayuk, skip him out. You don't have to put him in here. This shouldn't be labour intensive. If you only know you want to go for from a pool of 30 players, just focus on them and just use it as a way to guide yourself. This is very much an open source tool. You'll see that I have been iterative. I've built this up over time, and there are lots of funny conditional formatting things and checkups effectively that you can go and take a look at, but this is for you to use. I'm not claiming IP on this. You can go and sell this, not that anyone would buy it if you want to the next highest bidder, but the idea behind this is that you can make it your own, and that's why in every IDK that goes out there, you will have a version of my tiers that I see, and I will timestamp them, etc., and you'll have your own tier maker. What I would always recommend is just make sure you duplicate that tier maker whenever it goes forward, so you know exactly what you want, and you can create it from scratch. There are some guidance here. You could take a copy of mine and edit it. You can do whatever you want to it. And obviously, when you're in the draft, it's meant to be a live tool. You can choose you've got him, what have you, and it'll just do a bit of formatting, etc., to make sure that you can keep track of who you're after next. If you're not that technologically inclined, feel free to just print it off. That's what I'll actually do in the thing. I will create a PDF version as well. You can write it in if you want as well. All of this is it might be a bit more lo-fi, but you know what? I did that a couple of years ago, and even last year, you might have seen this already, but let's have a look at last year's as well. I did a tier list. I just coloured it in effectively. Looked at where I think people were going, where I think people had values, and I printed this off and just crossed out players as I went along. And I had 5 copies of it for the 5 drafts I did. It was really useful. So use it in whatever way you do. But what I cannot understate is drafting in tiers is really, really powerful, and I would recommend you draft you mock draft around this a couple of times just to make sure that you understand everything that can be done with this format. Now, there's something else I've done as well. So in the version 1.1, which will probably go out later today, in fact, I have created this monstrosity that you see before you. Now, this is slightly less of a tool that you can use for yourself, but the idea behind it is that it gives you, if you're really stuck, you can follow this as a bit of a guide to just doing what I think is a good option at the time of printing. So I've done 10 rounds and I've mocked it 3 different times from 3 different positions based on a 12-person draft. And what we'll do at the end of the episode, we'll do it really quickly. We'll just do 10 rounds and we'll go through it and see what happens in a particular way. But I've given a good option, the best option, a good option, what the kind of last person you should be considering, and what's an acceptable reach at each position. And if you're at the start, you've got what's great at the start, what's great in the first 4 picks, at the end, what's great in the last 4 picks, and the way behind this, it gives you all the information about where they're ranked in PPR, where their positional ranking is, etc. It highlights here if you think you've got too many players, so you can go and edit this as well. If I put DK Metcalf in again, for example, it will highlight them all to be red. Let's do that now. Yeah, so highlight them all to red. Okay, you can't have them that close in that close proximity. It can't be a best option and a good option throughout the whole thing, but yeah, it gives you an idea of what you can do, and we'll do a draft based on what my standard advice is, and I've also done other options as well, because there is the advent of different ways of playing. So the standard option that you've got here, standard plan, I feel it sounds like I'm selling some kind of health drink or something like that, but the standard plan that we've got here is, I think, a balance between mid-range RB, being opportunistic when you can, having a decent stab at running back early on, and loading up on decent PPR players. It's all based on PPR, because I think most people play PPR, and having to do so many different options is hard. You can also use this in 3rd-round reversal mind as well. Just make sure when you get to this point, you flip what you're looking at. So you look at these 2 to the first start, and then you go back to look at this. So yeah, we might do an example of that. Actually, I'll show you how it works. There are plenty of other ways to work though, and for many, you'll see that robust RB is an option, because RB is such a position of need, and there aren't that many purposeful and fantastic candidates available there. I'd give an option and say, right, well, what if you do draft 3 running backs in a row? What if what happens there? And it's something that some people shy away from because it gets a bit scary. Likewise, what if you don't draft running back until late? What if you load up late on it and you instead look to win at other positions like tight end and wide receiver and QB? What can you do from those options, and what would be a guide to doing that? And the idea behind this is just try it out. Follow along and see if you can feel comfortable in the position that you're in, because I've said all along, you've got to think based on what happens on the day. You can practice and practice and practice, but no one knows what it's like to get hit until you get punched in the face in a fight. And it's exactly that in drafting as well. No one really knows what's going to happen until you get into there, until someone makes a crazy decision and picks Patrick Mahomes 101, or ends up drafting the wide receiver that you thought was 2 rounds later earlier, and it ruins your plans, and you don't have any other options. Things happen based on lots of different prejudices and opinions as well. So I've done one for robust RB, one for zero RB, and I did an interesting one because I thought it was more interesting for different formats. And for any of you doing best ball, and best ball being a format where you don't set the lineup each week. You just collect a load of players and it sets your best lineup based on that pool of players. Normally it's a bigger pool of players, up to 18, normally rather than 15. And one of the common strategies around that is something called stacking. Go back and have a look at the information around stacking that I've done in other episodes. Fantasy 102 was really good for that. But stacks are really useful. So effectively, I've said, what if I saw a stack based on each position? And I've highlighted a bunch of stacks that you could go for based on that. For example, if I go Justin Jefferson early, what's a reliable stack I could go for? I could go for Kirk Cousins late. That's a really useful stack. So every time Justin Jefferson scores, because he's not going to score many running plays, you've got Kirk Cousins, DK Metcalf, and Geno Smith. If you want something that's a bit closer potentially, you've got Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram you could put paired together. Justin Fields with Cole Kmet and Khalil Herbert. There's loads of other things. Yeah, and depending on what position you are, you could get a bit more weird with it and go for multiple stacks if you've got multiple QBs. So here I did one where I liked Justin Fields and DJ Moore, but I could have also gone for Saquon Barkley, Darren Waller, and Daniel Jones. Heavily betting on what I think are the three best options in the Giants world. So there's plenty of different options you can have there, but this is a guide, and what I'll do is I will update this as well. This will go into IDK version 1.1, sorry, and I'll update it close to the time. I'm expecting to do 2 more iterations of this to really go through and think who are the best based on what's changed. I don't think anything's really going to change before training camp. I think once training camp goes, the hype goes up, ADP goes all over the shop, and we probably need to reassess. So get familiar with these styles of play, because any of these styles of play could be valid. I mean, I've been paying careful attention to this the Scott Fish Bowl of late, and there's a lot of zero RB and kind of champion wide receiver play going. There's also a lot of zero wide receiver play going. So that opposite, that robust RB, as I've called it here. So have a think about whether that's something that you would be interested in taking a look at. Right. We're going to take a little break, very little break, because we don't want this episode to be too long. And you know what? Because it's mock draft week, we'd be silly not to do an episode without doing a mock draft. So what I'm going to do is a side-by-side, similar to what I did yesterday. But I'm going to take one of these. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to use one of these boards to take a look, because you've already seen the tier maker and how I've used it in the past. Go back and have a look at that. You can make your own, etc. We're going to take a look and see if we can use one of these templated systems and see if we can stick to it, or see how much we stick to it. So tune in on the other side for that. Okay, guys, we're back already, and I've decided I'm going to go with something I don't normally go for, and I'm going to go zero RB. You've seen what a standard mock draft looks like for me. I haven't done a zero RB in earnest yet, so let's do it. You know what? Let's go in and see what it looks like. But we're going to do a zero RB. Here we go, and we're going to base it on as close as I can get it to this. So I haven't done it for each different position, but this is something, if you're going to draft, have a little plan. I found it really useful of planning, kind of what I would want versus what I don't want at each position of the draft. So I would always advocate having a plan when you're going forth on this one. So I'll just adjust the screens slightly so we get what we need, because we'll only need one of these pillars. I'm not going to delve into the others, and we'll make sure we have that. We're just going to start the draft from the off, get a random position. Where do we land? We land with the 101. I have yet to get that. Even in mocks, I am not that lucky. And we're going zero RB. So you know what? We're going for the best player available. We're going for Justin Jefferson. And you know what? I'm just going to mark these off as I go along. Can I do that? I'm not sure if I can do that here. I haven't got enough screen real estate to go and do that. But yeah, we you know what? We'll underline the ones we get. That's what we'll do, and see how closely we stick to it. So Justin Jefferson, get in the bag, and we have a very long wait here. You know what I'm actually going to do, because no, I won't do it this time. But I'm going for a first third. But I could demonstrate what it looks like on a third round reversal. I think that's a bit cheap to do right now. But you know how it is. If you're reading from this column, read from another column, and it flips, you'll get what it means. So here it's recommending the best options for me at the moment are going to be Chris Olave or DK Metcalf. And you know what, both of those guys are available to me. Yeah, I'm saying go wide receiver, early and often. Let's go for that. It's maybe looking at round 3, looking at Metcalf. So, sorry, Mark Andrews to go for that tight end 2 position. He is available to me. So, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go for Chris Olave because I think he is a 1 and he is an outstanding number 1, and Mark Andrews. So what I've got here by doing that, I can go, because I'm at the turn, I can go any order I want. So I'm going to go Mark Andrews first, Chris Olave second, and wait. So you can see how this works. It's designed to move you through the draft and give you options at each position. It's still saying wait on running back for the next position. So the next round, it's looking for Justin Fields. Now, obviously, there is an element of randomness, especially when you're playing against a computer. People might wait on certain positions. Justin Herbert's gone there. Justin Fields went just before. That's really annoying. And what it would have been nice to have is Justin Fields and DJ Moore. But I do have another option there. I have got DJ Moore available to me. He is really high on my list. And I think at that point, that's when I pivot, because if I look at my team now, Justin Jefferson, Mark Andrews, Chris Olave, DJ Moore, I have four primary pass receivers. And I compare that to someone else that I've got in this group, so someone else who I'm playing against. We've got this, let's compare Team 7. We've got Jonathan Taylor, Devontae Adams, Najee Harris, Amari Cooper. Again, we're keeping up pace with these guys. And maybe even because we've got pass catchers and it's a PPR system here, we're actually a little bit ahead on that side of things. You see, no one else has gone for that kind of thing. Everyone else has gone early running back, and you would expect that. But I still think there are good running backs on the board, and I still think there is a number 1 available here. And you'll see popping up on my screen here. If I go for Dameon Pierce, I think Dameon Pierce, a lot has been said about him, but they had a bad team last year, and they will be better this year. He ran it a lot last year. He will probably run it again a lot this year. Yes, that brought in Devin Singletary. I think he's a change of pace back more so. Could I talk myself into Miles Sanders? Yes, I could, but I feel like J.K. Dobbins, or who am I going for? Sorry, Dameon Pierce just really speaks to me as a good player. So I'm going to go with Dameon Pierce here. I've already underlined him, so he is my running back 1 off the board. Now, see, going further down the list now, it's tempting me. It's tempting me to go after running backs late. So I make sure I stack up a bit later, which I'm going to go and do. There are some people on my list. Miles Sanders went just after that, so I wasn't expecting to get him. And it's kind of advising me, if Darren Waller was available, you should have gone for him. But it's also saying if you haven't gone for QB already, why not try QB? Trevor Lawrence has unfortunately gone, so this is where it breaks down a little bit, because sometimes there is a random nature to it. So I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to look a bit further down my list, and just always have a backup plan in mind. It's crazy that this the first time I did this in earnest, it hasn't worked, but that's the random and ever changing nature of this. I know from my own tiers, I'm going to go heavy in volume on running back. So it means I can probably take a bit more of a risk at this point, especially if I've got 2 picks. So I'm going to go Alvin Kamara, knowing that I probably won't have him for the first couple of games. And I'm going to go for my good option here, and I'm going to go for A.J. Dillon. Now, I'm going to go for A.J. Dillon because I've soured a little bit on Aaron Jones. I don't think Aaron Jones has got particularly good outcome coming forth this season. And AJ Dillon has already impressed and will be a more heavy pass catcher, I think, this year. You can see there's a couple more running backs going. I'm probably still going to be targeting running back, if not quarterback, if it doesn't fall to me. Right now, it's looking like AJ Dillon was the last best option. Antonio Gibson, he's gone already as well. That's a shame. So I'm maybe just looking a bit further down my list, and I think a good analog in round 8 for Antonio Gibson, I think he's got just as much chance of being involved, is going to be Brian Robinson. And the reason I'm going so heavy on running back right now is I don't feel like I need to not, because realistically, Justin Jefferson, Mark Andrews, Chris Olave, and DJ Moore coming out of my lineup? No. Could Dameon Pierce? Yes. Could Alvin Kamara? Yes, he will for the first few weeks. Could AJ Dillon? Yes. I've got to fill 2 slots. but I don't feel like I need to fill any more, really. So I could have a rotating cast in that crew. So I'm going to go for Brian Robinson as being a good analog for Antonio Gibson. I think it could be any one of them getting the snaps there. And I'm going to dip down into someone who I think could be quite useful in some RJP Ryan. So what I've done here in the zero RB, and I've followed it as closely as I can. Really, we're going to put a little bit of italicized underline across under Antonio Gibson. I didn't really get him. I got someone who is close to him, but I did get some RJP Run, who I do think stands a chance of getting, at the very least. I mean, he was very serviceable as a guy as a third down guy last year. Now, unfortunately, this is where it breaks down, because that guy went for Aaron Rodgers, even though he had Josh Allen. So the one position that I really need is going to be quarterback. So don't really have any options here. It's saying maybe Jared McKinnon, but I feel like because I went early and off, I went often, late and often on running back. I feel like my roster is pretty full there. If I have too many more, it won't be great. So I'm now looking for the best value available and to fill out the rest of my squad. And funnily enough, it might actually be running back again. I'm not quite sure. If I'd have picked up Aaron Rodgers, I might have looked at Alan Lazard as a maybe mini stack there. I think Darnell Mooney could be interesting, but I've already got DJ Moore. Looking down the list here, are there some late players? You know what? There's a late player who I like a lot better. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go for a guy who I have quite high on my list, and I think could be pretty good in Jared Goff. I think I'll go for Jared Goff. I'm just going to check if I've got any synergies with any of the players. Technically, I've got a synergy with Derek Carr, with Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, but I don't really like Derek Carr's odds there. I think they'll be better in isolation. I think Derek Carr's going to throw too many interceptions, Jared Goff being a bit more reliable. So I'm going to go for Jared Goff in the 10th round, and then you'll see we're left to a bit license here, because I think at this stage it's very much up to the value that you think. And I am going to go for Kendre Miller, and I'm going to protect my investment higher up in Alvin Kamara and go for Kendre Miller, who at the very worst is serviceable for 6 games. We're getting him quite late in the 11th round. He's throwawayable if needs be. And finally, if you've watched a couple more of these drafts over the last few days, you will know exactly what player I'm going for. I'm going to go for a wide receiver, and I'm going to go for my man who starred down here, Van Jefferson. So that leaves me with a squad of Jared Goff, Damian Pierce, Alvin Kamara, Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, Mark Andrews, and DJ Moore as starters. That is an amazing starting set. I really like that. For Alvin Kamara as an RB2, you could replace him in the first couple of weeks for AJ Dillon. If Kendrick Miller gets hot, it's great. You've got bench players here that can either be throwaways or not. And the bench player, AJ Dillon, Brian Robinson, Smart JP Ryan, Kendrick Miller, and Van Jefferson. You know what? I'm really happy with that turned out. And that was not me thinking. I didn't think at all during that draft. I just took every player that the guide told me to. So that's one way you could use the IDK. There are so many different ways you can use it. I'd love to hear from the community what they do if you're drafting against me. I'd love to see if you're actually going to be doing this, because that'd be very interesting if everyone drafts exactly to order. But you know what? I think fantasy football, it should be treated as a community game, and it should be, knowledge should be shared. I think that's what really is key. But that's it for today. I probably bored you to tears enough. I was hoping this would be a 15-minute episode. It's turned into a half an hour one, because I'm so passionate about the subject, as you're probably aware of doing 6 episodes in a week. Obviously, these well in advance, but hopefully you enjoyed this. There'll be a recap episode just before the kind of core draft weekend in a couple of weeks' time, where I will take stock of everything we did in July and analyze whether we actually liked what we did. That'll be a bit of a megasode episode for you while I actually prepare for my real drafts, which are all happening the weekend of the 19th of August. As always, you can find me on all the social medias, on YouTube, at Rugby with Pads. I don't post often, but when I do, hopefully it's important. And so I'm not too noisy and annoying. And of course, if you like this kind of content and want to get access to this kind of stuff early, You can go to rugbywithpads.com. You can support from as little as £1. With £1, I'm going to do some stickers soon. If I haven't done already, I'm going to release some stickers for £1 members as well, just because I feel like you need something other than the early access to what you're going to get in the mid-season, in the middle of the season, and I'll do a state of the pod update where you'll get all that information as well. But you can also buy the merch there. I'm thinking about putting an Etsy store. Let me know if you would buy off Etsy as well. I'm more than happy to do that. You can get very understated but quite classy wear like this. Obviously not modeling the hoodies at the moment because it's a bit too hot. But I've rambled on long enough. Thank you so much for listening. As always, really appreciate it. And I will see you all on the virtual gridiron.